So we shipped product, Sexcel product about 12 months ago into these countries. And we've seen we're achieving conception rates on average of 5 to 10 percentage points of increased conception in compare to the product that was produced before for us called ABS Sexation, and for the other companies that you know called Sexing Technologies. I wanted to cover a little bit about how genetic progress works, and I'm sure we have lots of experts here in this room. But when we use conventional semen, as you know, you're going to get what we call modest genetic progress. When we use sex product, we see improvement in some genetic progress. In lots of, and I think Mark Smith is going to speak about this later on when he gives his discussion on beef and how we use beef product on dairy herds, but it has become increasingly popular in North America and around the world of using actually sex beef product on replacement heifers, dairy heifers across different parts of the world. When we're using sex product, you can see that genetic progress continue to move to the right of the curve, what we call improvements when we look at standard deviations. Sex product does have an increased performance in terms of value-added genetics in customer herds around the world. Now what I'd like to do is tell you a little more about what sex genetics represents around the world, what we see in terms of performance. These are again the two different curves that you see with conventional product at the top and what you see with sex product on the bottom. So the total market for sex semen or sex genetics is this last year is about 12 million processed units across the world. That represents only use of sex product at about 4%. And 10 million units that actually will be effectively sold or used on dairy herds across the world. About 197 million dairy units are AI using intensive operations across the world, and about 14 million beef units, both using artificial insemination, what we call fixed time AI. So you may ask yourself, what are some of the advantages of using sex genetics? One again is we've had the opportunity through Sexcel to offer a new technologies that has been developed with 10 years of work. A lot of the equipment used today was not even around 5 years ago because the software packages, lasers, and some of these equipment did not exist 5 or 10 years ago. With sex genetics, you have the opportunity to have more heifers to your herds, more genetic value to your herd, increased production activity, more options in that if we can offer better fertility, a better diversity of use of genetics, and providing you with better choice of bulls and better choice of product that you can use, you're going to see enhanced performance. So this curve is typically showing what you see in an actual genetic spread of a herd using typical conventional product. As you can see here, this is using conventional genetics. You can see the value of this genetic. 50% of the product will be females, 50% of the products will be males. And as you can see, the difference between the best and the worst is very little change between those two curves. When you're using sex product, you're gonna see again. You're gonna see the curve shifting to the right. You're gonna have more females. The curve is gonna be more spread, so you're gonna have more opportunity to increase, have better animals. You're gonna have less bulls as a consequence of that, and having more females in your herd, particularly if you're in an expansion mode of growing your herd, is going to give you a competitive advantage. So the big question is, where do you want your next generation of herd? Where do you want that to be? And with sex genetics, you can see a lot of the focus is having at least 80-85% minimum females. This is based against on a lot of data that we have produced over time, and I'm going to talk about that when I speak about validation of the technology. And you'll have a lot of opportunity again to continue to increase the value of your herd. This is where you want your next generation of genetics to be. You can see the curve moving to the right with use of sex semen. And now I just want to walk you a little bit about how this technology was effectively developed. As I mentioned to you, we spent about 10 years of work in developing Sexcel. Again, about 100 people have been associated in developing that. We run 24 hours, 5 days a week. So on the production side, we have employees that come at 6 a.m. in the morning on Monday mornings. And then the last shift ends up on Saturday morning, on Saturday mornings. So again, running a 24-hour, 5-day operation. We began actually, it says here 2010, but we actually began in 2007, exactly 10 years ago, when we licensed technology out of the University of Chicago, a company called Arix. And we licensed that technology for about a 3-year period. Now, to make some of these things work, you have to have the combination of biology and engineering, and keeping sperm cells alive is quite an undertaking, and it's a very challenging process. So after 2.5 years, we decided to bring this technology in-house, and we began a lot of the work back in 2010. The initial work in 2010 was actually having a proof of concept and developing an actual machine, a prototype, that could effectively try to look at both the eggs and the Y-bearing sperm cells. About 1.5 years later, we then have to answer the questions about, do incapacitated cells actually have an impact on fertility? We were able to prove in a peer review presentation out in France around that time that actually there's no difference between having incapacitated cells in the straw in relation to fertility. And people forget that actually in conventional semen, we have millions of cells that are already there inside the straw, and as you know, as you thaw the semen, we lose about 50% of those cells. In about 2012, we had to answer the questions about how do we effectively resolve an X and a Y bearing sperm cell. And I'm going to cover that later on, but it's quite challenging. The DNA on the X has 29 acrosomes, the X, and the Y chromosome has 29 acrosomes of the Y. The only difference is there's 3.8% more DNA in the X-bearing sperm cell than the Y. And to be able to actually resolve those two populations, it took us 2 years of work to effectively be able to do that. So 3.8% doesn't seem like a lot of difference, but it's actually quite challenging from an engineering point of view to effectively do that. In 2013 is when actually we got really excited. We started sending out field trial units out into customer herds, mostly into the United States. And we were achieving pregnancies with the desired result in terms of how many females we wanted to achieve. And basically it's when we asked the board of directors of Genus to continue to invest money to accelerate the process to develop Sexcel. In 2015, we moved to a new facility, so I would welcome that anyone that can come to Madison, Wisconsin to visit us on a tour. We have a 20,000 square foot facility where we have 2/3 of that is production of Sexcel. This year we'll be producing for ABS Global about 1.5 million units of sex product that we ship to about 70 different countries around the world. And our affiliates, which we have 24 today. And it's really exciting to see this taking place. And as I mentioned last year, we started shipping product to our top 50 markets around the world in getting customer testimonials where we're achieving increased conception rates with the use of Sexcel. So we're really, really excited about these prospects and how the product performs and works. So now I'm going to show you how this technology works. As I mentioned to you before, the X-bearing sperm cell, the X-bearing DNA is 3.8% greater than the Y DNA, and then when we go through a process where we insert a dye, that dye actually gets illuminated by one of our lasers. That laser then captures that 3.8% DNA difference between the X and the Y. And then we come downstream here and actually be able to incapacitate the unwanted cell. These cells are traveling here at about 10 meters per second, or about 17,500 cells per second. These lasers are very powerful lasers. If you do a dot in your paper, these two things happen within the same dot. It's pretty amazing that an engineering feat that you can effectively be able to do this. This incapacitation laser can actually pulse at about 30,000 pulses per second. And basically we detect the female DNA cells. Those cells are what we call gated and protected. And when they pass through, they're let go, moving forward. And the male cells are actually shot at and incapacitated, again, at about 17,500 times per second as it passes through this detection laser. going to show you a video about how this works.
Survey, an important one came back and said, we are looking for better genetics, better availability, and better fertility. Through Sexcel, we have a new technology, but as well, we have a commitment of the company to offer the best genetic to the customer.
This has been an undertaking over 10 years with many disciplines. We've worked very hard to have a development team. We have a team of biologists. We have a team of engineers. I think in total right now we have close to 75 people that have actually come to develop this technology and have the ability to launch it. And it's the combination of all those elements that actually make Sexcel launch very, very exciting.
The technology ABS uses is truly cutting edge, truly a 21st century technology. Traditional sorting is 1970s technology. What we're doing today in this lab could only be done now because the electronics, the lasers, the software, the fabrication methods, none of it existed 10 years ago. In a sorting technology, cells are traveling at highway speeds. It's like a car crash, hitting a wall at about 50 miles per hour. Our technology doesn't encounter that. It never separates the cells into droplets. They naturally flow down more or less a water slide and ultimately drip into the flexion tube. We also don't have an electric field that's applied to steer the cells, simply because we don't need to steer them. Much like you wouldn't want to live under power lines, these electric fields have an impact on cell biology that is yet to be fully understood.
We get the conventional collections in from the barn. We bring them in and run early quality control on them to make sure that the sperm cells are all viable and mobile and we don't have any physical defects. We stain those sperm cells, load them onto our proprietary technology on our technology platform, run them through it, and are able to identify the gender skew in that sample. If we have a really good ability to resolve those two samples, then what we are going to do is actually select the cells that we're interested in and then inactivate those cells that we're not. We'll collect it all and combine all the samples from the same bowl, spin them down on the centrifuge to increase the concentration. Prepare them with the right buffers for freezing, and then load them into straws at the right concentration. Those straws are frozen, and then a few of them are pulled out of inventory and we run exhaustive quality control to make sure that we still have the right number of mobile cells and that the viability still meets the criteria that we expect to sell. We double check the gender skew and also do a check for any bacterial contamination. At that point, we've got a number of straws in inventory that are ready to head out to farmers.
ABS did a significant number of field trials to validate and substantiate the fertility and sex-Q ratio of Sexcel. Today, we have more than 10,000 AI breedings. With the fertility data we have and the healthy cows on the ground, we are extremely confident in the performance of Sexcel.
Our focus is to continue to develop this technology. We already have licensed other technologies, what we call our version 2.0. So we see that actually enhancing the fertility experience in customer herds around the world and continue to work on that endeavor through our development, biology, and engineering team is something that we'll continue to do for many decades to come. I'll go over that.
We own the technology. It's available. Nobody has that. There's only one competitor that can say that much, but we're truthful to our customer. We base everything on data, and that's what we're providing to the market. It's very exciting to be in that position. There's nobody else.
We can feel proud to be direct contributors to the future of dairy and beef production as we do our part of meeting the challenge of nourishing 10 billion people by 2050, in part with our leading technology, Sexcel.
So that's a bit of the technology to kind of give you a bit of a flavor or how the technology works. Now I'd like to tell you about how we validated the technology, because I think it's extremely important to see how this impacts performance. This is actually how one of the instruments looks. So it's a table, we call it this is one instrument with 4 separate stations. We could actually run 4 separate pulls within these stations. You see this big white laser here in the back. That laser split that beam into these 4 different stations. And basically these boxes here are what we call our incapacitation laser that basically shoots the unwanted cells. The semen, as I mentioned, is like coming down a water slide. It just by gravity actually falls into this conical tube, and then we basically take all those cells, centrifuge them, collect them together, and then we basically put antibiotics and glycerol to protect them for cryopreservation when they're frozen. And then they're actually are put together in just our regular straws that you use for conventional semen, and we freeze, and on goes into customer herds. Right now we have again a floor filled with these. Again, we have a 20,000 square foot facility, and we have about we're gonna have about 25 of these instruments at our 20,000 square foot facility. Each of these tables can produce about 85,000 sex units per year. So let me talk about a little bit about again the difference between sorting and sexing. Again, sorting technology is technology has been around since the 1970s. Again, our technology is very new, what we call our 21st century technology, because again, some of the software, some of these lasers did not even exist 5 years ago. Didn't have the computation power to effectively be able to move these cells at the speeds that we currently do in it. When we look at the mechanism on orientations, basically we both technologies use the same dye, because you have to put a dye to be able to discriminate the eggs and the white-bearing sperm cells. What we call in terms of the actual experience is very different from sorting and sexing. When you sort the old technology, the sexing technologies, those cells are moving at about 50 miles an hour, almost like hitting a wall, and then you have electric charges at the end that actually move the eggs and the white-bearing sperm cells either to the left or to the right to be able to discriminate those cells. In our case, again, we keep those cells are identified, and the unwanted cell is incapacitated, is kept on the same tube, fed by gravity, again moving like a water slide. In terms of, we have the ability to provide customization, which you don't have with the sorting technology. Basically, our competitor runs on a black box, and basically they process everything from a service point of view. We have the ability to effectively being able to use, again, more diversity of pools, or be able to work to, in case people are interested in actually effectively customizing product for them, or even licensing those technologies for their own use. In relation to what's in a straw, we use at least 1 million post-model cells. So post-freezing, at least 1 million live cells in a straw, and at a minimum 85% female cells in a straw. Actually, this last week, I just looked, we're averaging now in the neighborhood of 88%. Some of the bulls are 90%, some we can get up to the mid-90s in terms of actual sex skew. It depends on the bull and depends on the circumstances. So that's a bit of a difference between sorting and sexing. Talking now about how the technology was validated. Again, I mentioned to you before that one of the first trials we had to conduct was relating to this issue of incapacitated cells, because we keep both cells in a straw. And this trial was done back in I think 2012, and has been peer reviewed by scientists and was presented at ICAR in France and also at a Repro conference out in the United States. But the first thing we wanted to do is making sure that having incapacitated cells in a straw did not affect fertility. And as you can see from the results, it basically showed that straws that had incapacitated cells versus the control, the fertility was exactly the same. Your next question might be, how do we validate these trials? How many trials did we do? We basically worked at least 4 major trials, 10 in total since the beginning, since 2013, about 10,000 sex cell units. That included about 2,000 units on in vitro fertilization on IVF, 32 farms, mostly heifer growers. We used 42 bulls, Holstein and Jersey primarily. And then in relation to AI, we use natural heats, chalk, fixed time AI, and normal sync protocols. As you know, typically use of sex semen is used in first and second service heifers. And then we use bulls across to making sure that we use really bulls that were low in fertility, bulls that were high in fertility. All these trials were blind trials. So we actually sold this to customers as fertility trials. So the actual customer did not know, or the producer did not know there were actually sex units being used. And the insemination was done by ABS technicians, on-farm technicians, people that were independent technicians that were not necessarily employees of ABS, and then following normal standard operating procedures on farm. Our first 2 trials were actually conducted in the summer because we wanted to see how the product actually performed under heat stress and summer stress across the different geographies. And as you can see, the product was tested across different areas of the US, Mexico, South America, primarily Brazil, out in Europe, and Australia. We use a system back in the US. We have what we call our black box with data, we call real world data. This is actually extremely powerful. We bring data every week that comes from customer farms like you across different geographies, from the US, Canada, Mexico, Chile, and the United Kingdom. We have about 12,053 hertz. That's in regular data. This is in 2015, 2016, 1,400 hertz. 1,644 hertz as of September of this year. Total international hertz about 735. And we have about 37 million cows in the database with 497 actual observations in the database that include calving, all types of information on farm. We also have data. What's unique about this data, actually 60% of the data comes from competitor data. So we have all the other studs data that comes that we have the opportunity to review. 40% is ABS data, 60% is competitor data coming from all the different studs across these different geographies. Again, this data, these observations includes breeding events, health events, milking information, etc. So the first thing you may want to ask is, what is the conception rate for Sexcel? This is the most recent trials, 2014 and 15 and 2016. As you can see, we have been improving conception rates. If you saw the one before, when we were validating whether incapacitation actually affected fertility, it started at 44%. As you can see here, 46%, 48%. And the new trial with almost 5,600 observations was 51% conception rate on sex relative to conventional semen. And when you go across all services, is 90% conception rate against conventional observations. Now you may ask the question about why are you not doing sex against sex or not sex against your competitor? And the reason for that is that we were restricted. We were also working with sexing technologies, and we had a contract with them for 5 years until we were ended up in court in Madison, Wisconsin last year. But we could not do head-to-head trials until starting actually on April 1st of 2017. So it has been recently that we've been able to actually sell product out to customer herds, and we can do what we call head-to-head comparisons with sexing technologies. We were preventing doing so in the past due to our contractual situation. We were also able to prove in federal court last year in Madison, Wisconsin, that ST was not only a monopolist, but they had behaved illegally in the sex semen processing market, which is the reason, by proving that in court, that it allowed us to actually be able to release and sell Sexcel into the global marketplace. So you may want to see what is what's happening in terms of conception rate over time, and this is what our competitor used to sell. This is back in early 2015, what we call Sex Ultra, and this is the release, or what they call their new product, called their 4M product. And I actually have seen data on this for over 10 years. The bottom line is ST has done a really good job, and we have to give them credit of making money for themselves, but they have not done a great job of improving conception rates across time to actually improve the situation in your herds and improving fertility. And I think that's the good thing about having competition, is it's going to force us to be better. And now we're going to have to see how they're going to react in terms of stepping up the game to making sure that we can provide a product that actually enhances fertility on farm. This is what we call relative. So you may want to ask, how does Sexcel compare to other studs? This is again relative conception rate against conventional, because we could not test against head-to-head. But as you can see, we're achieving close to 90% relative conception rate in comparison to conventional semen. These are all the studs in the United States. And this is combined over 1.2 million data points through real world data. So our product has gotten better. Our product is achieving performance on farm. We're really excited, and our customers are excited about its performance. And I showed you that earlier through some of the testimonials, and we look forward to working with customers like you in Russia to be able to prove to you that the product does what we say it does. This is some of the improvement that we've made in conception rate across the last 3 years. One is because we have continued to improve the processes in-house in terms of how the equipment works. We invested over $1 million when we call it quality control, because I think it's very important that before we send a product to your farms that we can effectively prove that that product is going to perform and meet your standards. And in the end, what we have heard, this is my 15th country that I visited in the last 10 weeks. And what was unique about all customers like you is that everybody said the same thing. I will buy Sexcel from you if one, I have the relationship with that ABS salesperson is built in trust, and it's also built on performance. So if you can guarantee that you can get my heifers pregnant, I'll buy from you. And so it's a common thread across all geographies and all continents. We just want the opportunity to show you that we can effectively do that. One of the also earlier trials that we wanted to look was looking at percentage females, how many females we could have on the ground. And again, as I mentioned to you, these are actual live calves on the ground. But again, we want to make sure we're hitting that 85% mark in terms of actual birds of females on the ground. And you may ask, why do you pick a minimum of 85% female cells in a straw? And again, we wanted to base it on real world data, on actual strength of data. And this is again over 1.2 million data points across different size of farms. Most of this is North America based. We do have some data from the UK and Mexico here. But basically what it shows is these are actual live birds of actual female sex animals on the ground. And as you can see, it doesn't get above 86%. On average, it has been about 85% females is what the customer experience is across all these farms. And lastly, I want to again talk a little bit about the people. It's kind of fairly unique if you come to our building to see what we have, because for an AI company, we have a lot of disciplines. So we have optical engineers, mechanical engineers, we have 6-7 software engineers. We have hired a person from the astronomy department who used to get satellites into space. Our head biologist actually came from the University of Wisconsin, worked on cancer research, on how to preserve ovaries from young girls to making sure they could have children in the future. So we have a quiet group of pretty talented people, and the focus is on how we're going to get things better to making sure that in the future every unit that we have is a sex unit. You know, I think the holy grail will be when a sex unit will behave equal to conventional semen. So our focus is in working diligently with our teams to making sure that in the future we can achieve that. Obviously, something that will meet your expectations of customers around the world. Again, I think it's an honor for me to be here. It's exciting to provide customers like you with an option and a choice. We have focused our end point on 3 different things: is to offer you a product that has better fertility, that has better genetics, and is providing you with choice. So again, thank you for the opportunity for being here. I'm enjoying my time in Russia and Sochi. It's a beautiful place. And I'm not sure I'm saying this right, but spasiba. Thank you. And I'll be here for questions as well, either now or later.
Что было, может быть, требует уточнений, потому что я старался услышать и перевод, который у вас шел, и, может быть, какие-то моменты вам показались требующие уточнения, поэтому задайте сейчас вопрос, тем более, что у Хесуса сейчас есть возможность вам откровенно сказать какие-то вещи, которые вы хотели бы услышать от первого лица, то есть от человека, который непосредственно занимался разработкой этой технологии и принимал в этом активное участие последние несколько лет. Вопросы? Есть вопрос? Отлично.
Да, есть. Вы сказали,
тогда, наверное, представиться лучше, да, чтобы было понятно и коллегам, аудитории.
Когда фирма село Ворошилово, мы не поняли, я не понял, 51%, плодотворного семени 2016 года, это на пёлках или на коровах?
Yeah, we heifers only. First and second service heifers. However, one of the questions that we get pretty frequently is, does it work in cows? And the reality is, in some of the geographies, people use sex semen in their best cows and the most fertile cows. So we do have a protocol for that, for use in cows, but our recommended use has been, when we were doing trials, was on first and second service heifers.
Екатерина, агрохолдинг «Авангард», Московской области. Вы сравниваете с Excel с традиционным семенем, а как же со старой технологией сексированного семени? Чем оно лучше старой технологии сексирования?
So those, the technology being used is making the comparison against the old product, which is in our case, was sexation product, or the old sex technology. So those results I show you was comparing sex against what we had used before. However, we could not do head-to-head trials, so we have to use conventional semen as controls.
Go back to your slide with the different US strains.
Yes.
So that's the comparison with the old technology.
So.
Нет, там есть табличка по оплодотворяемости, если можно по ней. Там сравнение традиционного семени и семени с Excel. А хотелось бы, может быть, в цифрах старая и новая технология. здесь, да.
Да.
So if you look at data, there's a big study done in the U.S. It's not here by Hutchinson, where they use 1.2 million sex units using the old technology, and the variability, meaning the distribution, is very, very wide. Meaning the old technology sex product conception rates in the high 30s, 37% on average. Hernando, do you have any comment? No. Did I answer your question or no?
Нет. Нет. Мы сейчас используем сексированное семя старой технологии. Да, сексуal technology. Почему мы должны уйти на сексель в цифрах? Чем оно лучше?
Okay, good question. Because we believe that in our case we're being what we call stacking the deck. One is that we believe the performance of the product, because the technology is gentler on the cells. It works again through gravity, not throwing cells at 50 miles an hour against the wall and then separating it with electric charges. We believe that that has an impact. However, we don't have enough data points to actually prove to you today that we're collecting data points to be able to show the significant difference. Right now what we have is testimonials from customers that are saying, hey, your product has performed better on farm by 5 percentage points in conception rates, up to 10 percentage points in conception rates, versus the old product they were using, which is the old technology. But for me to actually answer that question truly to you, we need 100,000 data points. We would have that, but we would have that probably by next spring. Because this last month, for example, again, until April of 2017, we could not do extensive trials because we were restricted in our contract with Sexing Technologies. We have the ability to do that now. So in September, we have put in 40,000 units of Sexcel in customer farms across the world. Month of October, we put 50,000 units out. Next month, we're putting 75,000 Sexcel units out in customer herds. So when we check all those animals, I think by, let's say, February, March of 2018, we'll have 150,000 data points to effectively answer your question.
Март пока все сведут в кучу, результат будет где-то в сентябрь, октябрь, ноябрь взяли.
Good question.
Мы уже давно семенем. Мы уже давно семенем. Просто мы на коровах не полгода.
Есть еще какие-то моменты, которые требуют уточнения, да, то есть с процентом оплодотворяемости, то, что на сегодня мы можем сказать и зафиксировать, то, что было уже подтверждено целым рядом исследований, это факт. Да. Другой результат сравнения с существующей технологией разделения семени по полу мы, естественно, увидим с вами, когда мы завершим вот этот второй этап использования семени. И тогда уже можно будет говорить о том, каков процент выхода животных необходимого нам пола будет зафиксировано в широком, на большом количестве стадов по всему миру. Есть еще какие-то моменты, которые требуют уточнений, и вы хотите непосредственно услышать это от Хесуса. Что еще интересует? Давайте, да, поактивнее.
Виктор Петляк, Реал Агро. Ну, у меня классический вопрос. А в основном отношении это большая разница между старой технологией и новой? Ну, в смысле?
Цена.
Цена вопроса.
That's another good question. Yeah. So I think, you know, price is also, I know, extremely important, particularly for customers. And I guess what I can say is we'll have product for different price points. I think the great opportunity, to give you an example, when we were working with the old technology, for every 10 bulls that we were taking using the SD technology, they used to reject 4 bulls because their objective was to actually process the bulls that were good enough to make units, not necessarily to get the best bulls for customers. So with the current technology using Excel, we're processing for every 10 bulls that come through our lineup, we're processing 9 of those bulls. So the diversity of bulls is better. And what I'm saying is I think we'll have 6 genetics for customers at different price points, depending on what you want. I think what we can offer is a better diversity of bulls and better genetics, and somehow with our technology seems to work better than what we were used to be doing before. Did I answer his question?
Нет. Нет.
Так, неясно. Непонятно. Нейтрально вот так ответить.
Удовольствие по быкам. Или туманная.
Средняя цена по сравнению с старой технологией и с новой.
От одного и того же быка, ну, к примеру.
You want lower price, right?
Конечно.
Если такие, которые понизить,
уже должна быть ниже. Если ты повысил, легче стало выражать.
Что я на сегодня могу сказать? Как уже отметил Хесус, у нас будет главное преимущество. Мы будем обладать достаточно широким предложением по быкам, которые мы можем подвергнуть технологии разделения по полу. Если у нас в предыдущие годы был весьма очень ограниченный выбор, который опять-таки объяснил Хесус, чем это было промотивировано и объяснено, то теперь мы постараемся выполнить пожелания большего количества клиентов. То есть мы найдем варианты получить продукт, который соответствует той генетике, которую вы хотите у себя иметь в стадах, и постараемся не обмануть ваши ожидания, что касается и цены на тот продукт, который вы выбираете. Но хочу сразу отметить, что в первую очередь и основным акцентом, вот начиная буквально с сегодняшнего дня, когда мы дадим старт по факту активных продаж семени с Excel в России, будет акцент на самую лучшую генетику, которая есть на сегодняшний день. Но здесь это объяснимо, потому что наша основная цель – это улучшать именно генетику у вас в стадах. Соответственно, это быки будут с показателями, если брать американские индексы, да, все хорошо ориентируются в них, это будут быки с показателями по 9 и 700. Это будет тот приоритет, на который мы в первую очередь будем обращать внимание. На сегодняшний день, насколько я понимаю, на рынке таких быков предлагается мало. Мы готовы, так сказать, восполнить существующую, так сказать, брешь и готовы предложить этих быков. Ну а все, что будет потом, начиная, ну, я так думаю и надеюсь, к 1 декабря, будут предложены именно те быки, которые расширят вот все то предложение, которое у нас будет для всех, для широкого использования.
Я думаю, в том числе и цену, да? Будет минимальная и максимальная.
Да, безусловно, как я уже отметил, на сегодняшний день это максимальная и лучшая генетика, которая, естественно, за собой тянет и уровень цен, конечно, соответствующий этой генетике. а чуть позже будет предложен более широкий спектр с различными возможностями и по цене, по формированию цены. Но сейчас я, так сказать, призываю вас, как людей, специалистов, именно напрямую связанных, отвечающих за формирование генетического потенциала вашего поголовья, обратить внимание именно на этих топовых быков. Потому что раньше доступ к такой генетике у нас был весьма и весьма ограничен. Сейчас такого ограничения нет. Я ответил на вопросы. Если дальше еще будут конкретные вопросы, конкретно по генетическим параметрам тех быков, которые мы готовы, у нас будет завтра презентация, которую немножко более подробно покажет вам, от чего мы отталкиваемся при формировании вот этого списка быков, доступных именно в технологии Six. Все, тогда у нас по расписанию перерыв. Я думаю, что все уже